Hello and welcome. This video is for anybody who would like to buy a small leather good. So think of a card holder, a wallet, a dog leash, keychain, a passport sleeve, for example. And when you're thinking of making a purchase, you'll typically consider the aspirational brands. Think of Prada, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, for example. But you're open to something different. Or you don't care for the aspirational brands and you want to focus on buying something from a brand solely focused on crafting high quality, under the radar products with absolutely no hype around the brand. Then I have an absolutely amazing French brand I'd like to introduce to you called Barbazan. I'm Anesu Sagonda and I produce educational luxury content for anyone after the finer things, whether you're new to money and wanting to learn how to navigate the terrain, or you're into luxury but you want to focus more on high quality under the radar brands, or you're young and starting out in life and wanting to reap the benefits of buying better quality from the get-go, then my content is geared towards you. Barbazan is a one-man operation. It's owned by Fabian Barbazan, and he designs, crafts, and retails all of his products from his atelier that's located in the 9th arrondissement in Paris. I'm going to include in the description box down below his Instagram account details as well as the physical address of his atelier. In the intro, I mentioned Barbazan is amazing. It truly is. It's an outstanding brand. The majority of his products, depending of course on the size, the material used, the complexity, are priced between 200 to 500 euros, and that's using cowhide or goat skin, for example. But if you opt to use an exotic leather like alligator or crocodile, then the price will be above 1,000 euros. But the quality of the leathers he's using is exceptional. The craftsmanship, phenomenal. But what you are getting from each and every single one of his products is a product that has been made using leathers and craftsmanship that you typically get from bespoke level of luxury, the top level of luxury. And you're getting all of that goodness, bespoke level of luxury goodness, at affordable level of luxury prices. And then coupled with the customer service I experienced, it was flawlessly delivered. I'm still struggling to just think what's happened. And I know if I was to list my top 3 finds for 2025, Barbazan would be on that list. And so a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. Fabian is somebody who is very gentle, softly spoken, but incredibly amazing. He's good at what he does. Barbazan is the type of brand I would keep to myself. If I had close friends, family members who said, I have a limited budget, I can't afford the lofty prices that the aspirational brands charge, but I want something that's incredibly well made, I wouldn't hesitate to recommend Barbazan. And so this is a personal recommendation from me to you. Fabian doesn't know I have a channel. When he asked what I do, I said I'm into marketing, and then changed the topic very quickly. He will find out I have a channel once this video goes live. All I ask of my viewers is, if you do reach out, you feel inspired, you'd like to order something from Fabian, please be kind, please be respectful, but most of all, please don't waste his time because it'll reflect badly on me. I commissioned a custom card holder from Barbazan, and I'm going to talk about it in detail in this video. But what I'd like to do is make this content value added for you, and what I will do is compare and contrast my custom card holder with a similar card holder from Louis Vuitton. That way you'll be able to really understand what you will typically get from a high quality under the radar brand versus an aspirational brand. I'm also going to include timestamps as always, so please feel free to skip bits because the video will be detailed. I'm going to kick off with the leather. France and Italy are some of the main markets, not only in Europe, but globally when it comes to leather tanning. And they have their own unique strengths. So the Italians, for example, they're really well known and they're respected for their full grain vegetal tanned leathers. Leathers that are durable and leathers that will patina absolutely exquisitely with time. The Italians also have an abundance of tanneries. They have hundreds of tanneries, catering to all segments of the market, the top, the middle, the bottom end of the market. How a tannery in Italy will set itself apart from its competitors is it'll use its own artisanal, traditional techniques to ensure that they're able to process a leather that is different in terms of the texture and the finish to its competitors. The French, now they are really well known and respected for their refined calfskins that are incredibly elegant. It's all about the look, they're beautiful, the designs, the textures are soft, they're lightweight leathers, and they are leathers that are geared towards the top end of the market. For brands like Hermes, Chanel, Celine, Loewe, for example. But France is very different to Italy in that they have significantly fewer tanneries. Over the years, they've whittled down their tanneries to about 40-45 tanneries in France, and they're focused on processing the very best quality leathers in the industry. And what you'll also find is that the majority of the tanneries in France are owned by the big brands. I think, for example, Tannery Haas is owned by Chanel. Louis Vuitton Moët Hennessy owns Tannery Rue. Tanneries Dupuis, Danone, HCP are owned by Hermes. And what the brands will do, and rightly so, is they will keep the very best quality leathers for themselves. That is what they will use. And then whatever's left, which is still very good quality, will be sold online through their agents, sold on to other brands. Some of the brands I talk about, the high quality, under the radar brands. Barbazan use a hybrid leather called ingrassato for the majority of their products. They also use goatskin, which originates from France. But the ingrassato, which they use for the majority of their products, is a hybrid French-Italian leather. The hide originates from France, and specifically from a breed of cattle that is found either in Brittany or in Normandy. And it's a breed of cattle that is really well known, and it's liked for the thick, robust hides that it has. They will use the part of the hide that runs from the back of the neck all the way down to the middle of the back. That's because there's quite a bit of fat under that part of the hide. And fat is fantastic. It's really good when it comes to the processing of vegetal tanned leathers. So the hide originates from France, transported to Italy, to Tuscany, where it is vegetal tanned to absolute perfection by the masters. Ingrassato is a leather that is durable, it'll patina absolutely exquisitely, and it's also a firm leather. You need firm leather for saddle stitching, and all of Barbazan products are saddle stitched. Louis Vuitton has roughly 460 stores in the world. That's a figure from 2023, and I'd hazard a guess and say it's still roughly the same, give or take 3 or 5 stores. A card holder is a small leather good. Small leather goods, together with cosmetics and fragrances, for example, are bread and butter products. Products that have significantly higher turnover than the brand's big ticket items. They're typically considerably cheaper, and they're an easier way for a consumer to buy into the brand, particularly if they can't afford a big ticket item. Louis Vuitton has 460 stores globally, roughly. And for them to ensure that they have enough small leather goods in all of those stores, they need to be crafting significantly high volumes of those products. And for them to do that, they need to have adequate raw materials, the leathers, the thread, for example, in fairly sizable quantities. And they also need to ensure that the leather is consistent. A brand will never use good quality or excellent quality leather and then process it. They will use it as is and just let the leather age beautifully and patina with time. Louis Vuitton need to process the leather to ensure that they have enough leather that looks a certain way and consistently to be able to craft the small leather goods day in, day out for extended periods of time. And for them to do that, they will process the leather. They'll not be processing good quality leather. It's typically average, and dare I even say it could be poor quality leather, because it's going to be heavily processed to look and behave a certain way. The small leather good I have is soft, but the leather is not thick and sumptuous. It doesn't feel like good quality leather. It is soft though. And what's worth noting is that when I first saw it and I saw the added shimmer, I was taken aback. It looks tacky, and I immediately realized that they've added the shimmer just to help mask the over-processing of the leather. When processing a leather, the natural oils are stripped out, so it's not going to patina. And over time, the leather will start to look dry. It possibly could crack. The shimmer is going to mask all of the issues that arise from the over-processing. The leather itself, on the small leather good, it doesn't smell of leather at all. It doesn't have a smell. It feels plasticky. And I think what makes it even worse is the charms that have been added onto the card holder. When I felt them, the weight is in between. It's not overly light, paper light, and it's also not weighted. It doesn't feel like solid brass that has plating on top. I looked closely at the coating and I couldn't help but feel it will tarnish, and it will tarnish fairly quickly. The color is a mix between navy, and there's a bit of a green hue coming through, a dark green hue coming through. And it's leather that's just been heavily processed and literally had the life beaten out of it. Moving on to the craftsmanship. As I mentioned earlier, Barbazan products are all saddle stitched. He doesn't use a combination of saddle stitching or machine stitching. It's all saddle stitched. Saddle stitching takes time, and it's typically a more robust way of stitching a product, especially in comparison to machine stitching. But you will find in some instances, particularly the higher levels of luxury, so think ultra high-end bespoke level of luxury, think of Hermes with their Kelly, their Birkin, they will use a combination of machine stitching and saddle stitching, and they're both done to an incredibly high standard. There isn't a difference between the two. They're just as robust as each other. But you don't necessarily get that with the lower levels of luxury. When I look at Barbazan and compare it with the Louis Vuitton card holder, the Barbazan saddle stitching is definitely superior to the Louis Vuitton machine stitching. There isn't anything outstanding or superior or unique or enhanced about the Louis Vuitton stitching. Saddle stitching is typically, as I said, a more robust way of stitching in comparison to machine stitching. It's done entirely by hand, and you really get to see Fabienne's experience and skill, because the stitches on the card holder are incredibly neat, and the tension is even consistently throughout the product. There isn't a difference. It's consistent, it's neat, it's done fantastically well, and it's incredibly neater than Louis Vuitton. With Louis Vuitton, the stitching is fit for purpose. It'll keep the card holder in place intact. I would imagine you're more likely to have problems with the leather than the stitching, but the stitching is not as neat as the Barbazan. But I can see they have reinforced the start and the end of every line. When it comes to the thread, Fabienne uses linen, and linen is what is traditionally used when it comes to saddle stitching. It's natural, it's durable, and Fabienne bolsters the durability of the linen thread by waxing it. You can buy pre-waxed thread, but I remember Fabienne saying, no, I won't do that. I wax it myself because I want to ensure it's waxed incredibly well. And he uses a really good solution that he bolsters with beeswax, and the beeswax just helps to give the shine, the finish, and just add a waterproof element to the thread. It also ensures the thread doesn't fray, and it also makes the thread a lot easier to maneuver when it comes to the individual knots that are done during the saddle stitching. The advantage of saddle stitching is that every stitch is done by hand, and every stitch has a knot added to it. So if a stitch were to unravel, for example, it would be just that one stitch and not the entire line that you may get when it comes to machine stitching, depending on how well it's done. But with Louis Vuitton, they've reinforced the start and the end of the line. It's highly unlikely the stitches would unravel, and then you can pull the thread and then unravel the rest of the line. That is highly unlikely to happen unless you physically cut the thread. So Fabian uses waxed linen that's incredibly strong. It has the waterproof element. It has been bolstered. It's really good quality. So the saddle stitching and the fantastic linen. With the Louis Vuitton, I would hazard a guess and say they use either a man-made thread, polyester, I would say nylon, or possibly cotton, a mixture, a blend of those. Linen hasn't yet been adapted for machine stitching, so it would be a man-made fiber or a blend with a cotton thread. The thread they've used, it's fit for purpose. I don't have an issue with it. I don't imagine the thread would fray or split, for example. What I like most on the Louis Vuitton card holder is the edge coating. It's been done well. It's thin, it's neat, it's even, it's consistent throughout the card holder. But there is a difference in the thickness between the top of each pocket on the front and back of the card holder and the outer perimeter of the card holder. The thickness of each little pocket, I would say, is the equivalent of 2 thin sheets of paper joined together. Whereas the outer perimeter, I would say it's the equivalent of possibly 3 thin sheets of paper joined together, that sort of thickness. Barbazan is even thinner. It's neat, it's wonderful, it looks absolutely beautiful. The top of each little pocket, I would say, is about the thickness of 1 sheet of paper, and the outer perimeter is the thickness of 2 sheets of paper. What's worth noting is that when you flip the card holders onto their side, the Louis Vuitton card holder, if you look at the top and run your eye down to the bottom, you'll notice from the top to the bottom, it gets thicker as you get towards the base. With the Barbazan card holder, it does get ever so slightly thicker as you get to the base, but it's nowhere near as pronounced as the Louis Vuitton card holder. And that is because Louis Vuitton are crafting their card holders en masse. I would imagine the leathers are all cut using a computer, so they can cut mass quantities of the leather. And then a physical human being will, I would imagine, put the card holder together and then hand sew it on the machine. And then it's passed on to a different team that would then apply the edge coating. They would apply it, it's dried, and it's done very quickly. And they're producing fairly sizable quantities within a limited period of time. I would imagine from start to finish, it would take about an hour, maybe a little less, to craft a card holder from start to finish with Louis Vuitton. Whereas with Fabian, he hand cuts the leather, and then he makes sure that the edges are thinned out so that it's really thin throughout. Saddle stitches, that takes time. That would take hours to saddle stitch the entire card holder. And then applying the edge coating. That would be done by him like they would with Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton, I'd imagine, it could even be placed on a machine or a human being, but they're doing a lot of edges at a time. But with Fabian, he is using a really good quality solution, and he bolsters the solution with beeswax. What I have noticed is I've met with a number of artisans focused on the top end, ultra high end, bespoke level of luxury. And what they consistently use is beeswax in the edge coating, as well as waxing the linen thread using beeswax. Beeswax added to the products, it means they're adding time, they're adding expense, but it means they're elevating the overall look and the quality and durability of their product. Beeswax being added to the edge coating solution just helps to bolster it, bolster the durability. It adds the waterproof element as well as helping to set the edges beautifully. And so Fabian, with each and every single surface that's edge coated, he will sand the surface down. He will add the edge coating, the beeswax, and then he will iron the solution to dry it. That process is repeated 3, 4, possibly 5 times until he has been able to achieve the perfect surface that he would like. That takes time. Of all the different components of craftsmanship, the edge coating, if it's done well, it's what is the lengthiest, and it also bumps up the price of products. But you don't have that issue with Fabian. He's offering all of that at a really, really good price. The Barbazan card holder, the base price is 230 euros. And then if you add, for example, as I've done, initials and possibly the Barbazan stamp I had added to the back of the card holder, it bumps up the price, I think, to about 260 euros, which is the equivalent roughly of 240 pounds. The Louis Vuitton card holder is 350 pounds. The experience. As I mentioned, I approached Fabian as an independent customer who is interested in his brand and exploring his products. The experience from when I first walked into his atelier to when I picked up my card holder and left was absolutely flawless. He was a delight to deal with. He was professional. He went above and beyond to respond to my questions via WhatsApp or in-store, explaining the different processes. It took time. It's a turnaround period of typically 1 to 2 months, depending on how busy he is. But I actually said to Fabian, take your time, because I knew I wouldn't be back in Paris for another 3 or 4 months. But I happened to be back after 3 months, and he had completed my card holder and it was waiting. With Louis Vuitton, I managed to buy my card holder on the 3rd attempt. The first 2 times, the waiting times were just too lengthy. But the 3rd time when I went in, the assistant was fantastic. They were lovely, they were engaging, they were professional. There's absolutely nothing I could fault about my interaction with them, but it took 3 attempts. Louis Vuitton is the most valuable luxury brand in the world. It's also a brand many people will buy from when they start their luxury journey. The card holder has been made using leather that's fairly processed, and they've added a shimmer to the leather to try and mask some of the imperfections. They've also thrown in a couple of fairly cheap charms to try and justify the £350 price point, versus a card holder from Barbazan, an unknown artisanal French brand run by a one-man operation. The card holder has been made using ingrassato leather, which is an exquisite vegetal tanned leather that's going to patina wonderfully with time. The quality of the leather is on par with what the likes of Hermes use for their bags. And every single component of the card holder has been crafted to the highest standard. The pockets are a little tight at the moment, but they'll soften with time. Which card holder would you choose? Any thoughts, any comments, any questions about the video? Let me know, as always, down below.